Hello everyone, welcome to my channel SW Metro official channel.
Christine Brown faces off with Kody as Ysabel watches heartbroken. Christine Brown, long vocal about her frustrations in her plural marriage to Kody Brown, finally confronted her husband in a raw and emotional showdown, one that their daughter, Ysabel, was forced to witness, her heartbreak palpable. The moment was a culmination of years of neglect, favoritism, and emotional distance that had eroded Christine's once strong faith in their polygamous union. As the cameras rolled, viewers were given a front-row seat to the unraveling of a marriage that had been teetering on the edge for years, with Ysabel's tearful presence adding an extra layer of devastation to the already painful exchange. Christine, who had spent decades as the third wife in Kody's polygamous family, had grown increasingly disillusioned with their dynamic, particularly as Kody's attention and affection seemed reserved almost exclusively for his fourth wife, Robin. The favoritism had been a point of contention for years, but the breaking point came when Kody refused to accompany Ysabel to her crucial spinal surgery, a moment that shattered Christine's remaining trust in him. The surgery, necessary to correct Ysabel's severe scoliosis, was a terrifying ordeal for the teenager, and Christine had begged Kody to be there for their daughter. Yet, citing vague COVID concerns and what many fans perceived as sheer indifference, Kody declined, leaving Christine to shoulder the emotional and physical burden alone. This abandonment was the final straw for Christine, who had already been questioning her place in the family for years. The confrontation between Christine and Kody was explosive, with years of pent-up resentment and pain pouring out. Christine, usually diplomatic and cheerful for the sake of family harmony, dropped all pretense and laid bare her grievances. She accused Kody of emotional neglect, of failing to be a present father, and of prioritizing Robin and her children over the rest of the family. Her voice trembled with anger and sorrow as she recounted the times she and her children had been sidelined, the holidays spent without him, and the emotional toll his favoritism had taken on their entire household. Kody, defensive and at times dismissive, attempted to deflect blame, insisting that Christine was exaggerating or misunderstanding his intentions. But his justifications rang hollow, especially as the camera panned to Ysabel, who sat silently, tears streaming down her face as she watched her parents' marriage implode before her eyes. Ysabel's presence in the room made the scene all the more devastating. At just 17 years old, she had already endured more pain than any child should: chronic back pain, the anxiety of major surgery, and the crushing disappointment of her father's absence during one of the most vulnerable moments of her life. Now, she was forced to witness the full extent of the rift between her parents, a rift that had been widening for years but had never been so openly displayed. Her heartbreak was evident. This was not just a fight between her mother and father, it was the collapse of the family structure she had known her entire life. For Ysabel, who had always adored her father despite his flaws, seeing him refuse accountability and dismiss her mother's pain was a betrayal that cut deep. The fallout from this confrontation was inevitable. Christine, realizing that she could no longer subject herself or her children to a one-sided marriage, made the courageous decision to leave Kody. Her departure marked the first time a sister wife had voluntarily exited the Brown family, sending shockwaves through the polygamous community and the show's fanbase. For Christine, it was a long overdue act of self-preservation, one that prioritized her happiness and her children's well-being over the illusion of family unity. But for Ysabel, the separation was bittersweet. While she supported her mother's choice and understood why Christine needed to leave, the reality of her parents' split was a painful adjustment. The father she had once idolized had become a distant, unreliable figure, and the family she had grown up with would never be the same. In the episodes that followed, viewers watched as Christine rebuilt her life outside of plural marriage, embracing independence with a sense of relief and optimism. Ysabel, though still healing from the emotional scars of her father's neglect, began to thrive under her mother's unwavering support. Meanwhile, Kody's relationships with his other wives continued to deteriorate, with many fans blaming his selfishness and inability to fairly distribute his love and attention for the family's unraveling. The heartbreaking confrontation between Christine and Kody, witnessed by a devastated Ysabel, was more than just a dramatic reality TV moment. It was the breaking point of a family that had been crumbling for years, a stark reminder that even the most deeply entrenched systems can collapse under the weight of neglect and inequality. As Christine moved forward, fans rallied behind her, praising her strength and resilience in choosing happiness over a loveless marriage. Ysabel, though forever marked by the pain of her father's abandonment, emerged as a symbol of quiet strength, supporting her mother while navigating her own healing. And Kody? Left to reflect on the consequences of his actions, he faced the harsh reality that loyalty and love cannot be demanded, they must be earned. The emotional showdown between Christine and Kody, with Ysabel's heartbreak as its silent witness, was a turning point not just for the Brown family, but for viewers who saw in their story the universal truths about love, neglect, and the courage it takes to walk away. Christine Brown squared her shoulders and looked Kody Brown in the eye. There was a shift in the room, an unmistakable tension that made even the camera crew fall silent for a beat. This wasn't just another disagreement between a husband and a wife who had long since learned to argue in circles. This was a confrontation years in the making. Christine's voice was steady, almost too steady, like someone who has already made peace with the outcome but still needs to speak her truth aloud. Kody's expression, in contrast, oscillated between frustration, disbelief, and the kind of defensive energy that suggests he was bracing for a fight. Sitting off to the side, almost tucked into the background yet emotionally front and center, was their daughter Ysabel, her eyes brimming with the kind of silent hurt that cuts deeper than tears. This wasn't just about her parents, this was about the years of fractured promises, fractured holidays, and fractured love that had quietly piled up around the Brown family like so many loose stones in a wall nobody was willing to repair. Christine's tone wasn't cruel, but it was unflinching. She reminded Kody of the times he had chosen not to show up, not just physically, but emotionally. She spoke of birthdays spent with one parent missing, milestones where the person who was supposed to be the emotional anchor of the family was instead tied up in the storms of other relationships. Christine wasn't asking Kody for an apology anymore, that stage had passed. What she was demanding now was accountability. Her words weren't about fixing them, they were about acknowledging that the damage was real, that the consequences were lasting, and that the people most deeply affected by their breakdown weren't the adults arguing across the kitchen table, but the children who had grown up learning to live without the security of both parents in the same emotional space. Kody, for his part, bristled. He leaned back, arms folded, giving Christine the kind of wary, calculating glance that suggested he was already preparing his rebuttal. When he finally spoke, it was with the clipped, measured cadence of someone who believes they're already in the right and simply needs to convince everyone else. He talked about the complexities of plural marriage, about how no one truly understands the weight he carries as the head of such a sprawling family. He framed his absences not as neglect, but as sacrifices he had to make to keep the entire structure from crumbling. To him, every choice had been part of a bigger plan, a chess game in which each move was made with the survival of the whole in mind. But Christine wasn't buying it, and neither, from the look on her face, was Ysabel. For Ysabel, this wasn't just about marriage dynamics. She had lived the reality of her father's absence in the most tangible ways. Viewers remember the painful surgery she underwent for scoliosis back in 2020, and the emotional blow when Kody chose not to accompany her to the hospital because of COVID concerns. That moment had crystallized something for her, a truth she had tried to push aside but could no longer ignore. Her father's priorities were not always aligned with her needs. Sitting in that room now, hearing her mother demand answers, brought all those old wounds bubbling back to the surface. She wanted to believe that this confrontation might finally lead to some kind of reckoning, some moment of clarity where Kody would see what he had missed. But as the minutes ticked on, and the back and forth between her parents became more about defending positions than bridging gaps, hope began to fade from her eyes. Christine, aware of her daughter's presence, was careful not to let the argument spiral into personal attacks. Instead, she held the focus on patterns, on the repeated choices that had left her feeling like she and her children were an afterthought. She reminded Kody that love isn't a speech or a title, it's a series of actions that, over time, either build trust or erode it. She pointed to the years when she had kept the home running, made the birthdays special, handled the school meetings alone, all while waiting for Kody to make good on promises to be there more. The subtext was clear, she had been a single mother in all but name long before she decided to officially end the marriage. Kody tried to pivot, pointing out the sacrifices he believed he had made for Christine's side of the family. He referenced road trips, financial decisions, even moments when he believed he had shown loyalty that went unrecognized. But Christine didn't flinch. Her face was calm, almost eerily so, as she told him that the moments he was clinging to couldn't outweigh the years of absence. "You can't fix neglect with a few grand gestures," she said, her voice cutting through the air like glass. "Love is consistency, not convenience." Ysabel's gaze darted between them, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Every time her father spoke, there was a flicker.